I stood there in the center of the dining room, surrounded by dozens of pristine white-clothed tables, the smell of fresh herbs and roasting garlic thick in the air, and absolute crushing silence. It was 7 p.m., the exact moment I had told my parents, my siblings, and my extended family to arrive for the grand opening of my dream restaurant, the place I had spent my entire life savings and 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears to build. Not a single person walked through that door. Not a text, not a call, not even an excuse, just a vacant room and a kitchen staff looking at me with pitying eyes. I had cooked for 30 people, a feast that had taken me 3 days to prepare, and now it was all going to waste while my phone sat cold and silent on the counter. Was I wrong for expecting them to show up to the biggest milestone of my life? Or is this the moment I finally realize that I am nothing more than an ATM and a doormat to the people who are supposed to love me most? Tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you finally cut them off forever after this, or am I overreacting? My journey to this moment didn't start with a restaurant. It started with the dream of finally proving I was good enough for a family that never once told me I was. I grew up the middle child in a house where my older brother could do no wrong and my younger sister was the golden girl who never had to lift a finger. I was the one who worked 3 jobs through college, the one who sent money home when my parents claimed they were short on rent, and the one who always showed up for every single event in their lives. Whether it was a birthday, a graduation, or a random Tuesday when they felt like hosting a barbecue, I was there. I was the reliable one. But when it came to my own ambitions, the response was always the same: dismissal. When I told them I was leaving my corporate job to go to culinary school, my father laughed in my face and told me I was throwing away a career for a hobby that wouldn't last 6 months. When I spent every penny of my inheritance on this space, a beautiful historic building that needed a total gut renovation, they didn't come to visit. They didn't ask for photos. They just asked when I was going to stop playing around and get a real job. For months they treated my project like a joke, yet they were the first to ask when I'd be able to host them for free meals. I invited them to the grand opening specifically to force them to see it, to make it real for them, thinking that if they saw the sign on the wall and the professional kitchen I had built, they would finally respect me. I sent out formal invitations weeks in advance. I even did a follow-up text 3 days ago. My brother, who is usually the loudest one in the group chat, gave a thumbs-up emoji. My mother said she would be there. I felt a sense of pride that I hadn't felt in years. I truly thought this was the night that would change everything, the night they would finally look at me not as the black sheep or the odd one out, but as a success. I spent that morning obsessing over every detail. I polished the silverware until it shined like mirrors. I spent hours perfecting a signature reduction for the main course. I had even prepared a special seating arrangement, putting my parents at the head table because I wanted them to feel honored by my work. As the sun began to set and the light turned that golden, hazy hue through the front windows, I stood at the door, greeting the few paying customers who had seen my advertisement online. They were strangers, but they were kind. They complimented the decor, they raved about the appetizers, and for a split second I felt the high of finally being a restaurateur. But every time the door chime rang I jumped, convinced it was them. At 7:30 I walked into the back, my heart pounding in my throat, and I called my mother. It went straight to voicemail. I called my brother. Silence. I called my sister and she actually picked up, but the sound of loud music and cheering in the background hit me before she even spoke. She didn't even say hello. She just asked if I was calling to bring her the leftovers from the restaurant later that night. I asked her where she was and she laughed, telling me they were all at the beach house for a surprise party for a cousin I hadn't even been invited to. My blood ran cold. They hadn't forgotten. They had actively chosen somewhere else to be. They had chosen a party where I wasn't even wanted over the most important night of my life. I stood there listening to her talk about how great the food was at the beach house, holding the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I think about the thousands of hours I spent scrubbing floors, negotiating with contractors who tried to rip me off, and crying in the walk-in freezer when the stress of the mounting debt felt like it would suffocate me. I remember sitting on the floor of this very building at 3 in the morning, eating cold ramen, just hoping that one day the lights would turn on and the world would see what I had created. And yet here I was realizing that to them, I was just a background character in their lives, someone to be summoned when they needed a loan or a favor, but never someone to be celebrated. The audacity of my sister asking for leftovers while I was staring at 30 untouched plates of gourmet food, made me feel physically ill. It was like a curtain was pulled back, and for the first time I saw the stage for exactly what it was, a setup where I played the servant and they played the royalty. I thought about all those times I missed my own life events because I was too busy working to pay for their vacations, their new cars, their emergencies. I had been so desperate for their validation that I had actually allowed them to define my self-worth. I had allowed them to make me feel like I was the one who was lucky to be in their company, even as they belittled my dreams and ignored my accomplishments. I realized that my desire for their presence at the opening wasn't really about the food or the restaurant. It was about me begging for them to finally acknowledge that I was a person of value, independent of them. It was a cry for help that had been ignored for decades. I looked at the empty, perfectly set table in front of me, with my parents' names on the cards, and I felt a weird, cold sense of clarity. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was a sudden, sharp, and undeniable anger. It was the kind of anger that doesn't burn you but rather fuels you. I realized that if I let this slide, if I accepted their excuse when they inevitably showed up with some pathetic apology, I would be signing up for another lifetime of being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. I realized that the silence from them wasn't an accident. It was a reflection of their total lack of respect for me as an individual. They didn't see me as a business owner. They saw me as a servant who had finally gotten a bit too uppity. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. The restaurant was empty of my family. The staff was watching me with awkward, concerned stares, and I had to decide whether to crumble or to take control. Before I tell you exactly what I did to handle this betrayal and how I completely changed my relationship with my family afterward, I want you to pause right now and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted them there? Or would you have just gone silent and cut them out? Think about it and let me know. What happened next changed my life entirely. I didn't say a word to my sister. I hung up the phone, walked into the kitchen, and told my head chef that we were closing the doors to the public for a private event. I took every single dish that was meant for my family, the expensive steaks, the premium sides, the wine, and I walked out to the dining area where the strangers were sitting. I told them that because of a private cancellation, the kitchen was in overdrive and I wanted to treat them to a full complimentary 5-course tasting menu on the house. The atmosphere shifted immediately. These strangers who had just come in for a quick bite became the most incredible, supportive, and appreciative guests I could have ever asked for. We spent the night laughing, talking about the vision for the restaurant, and receiving genuine praise for the food I had put my soul into. I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying for years. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped looking at the door. I realized that for the first time, I wasn't performing for an audience that didn't care. I was serving people who actually valued what I had to offer. When my family finally tried to show up at the restaurant the following weekend, expecting a free meal and a warm welcome, they found the doors locked, and when they called, I didn't answer. I had blocked their numbers. When they eventually showed up at my house, they had the audacity to be angry, demanding to know why I hadn't served them, why I wasn't answering their calls, and how I could be so selfish. I stood in my doorway and told them exactly what I thought. I told them that they were no longer welcome in my restaurant, my home, or my life until they could learn to treat me with the respect a human being deserves. I watched their faces contort from disbelief to genuine indignant rage. My mother started crying, telling me that family is everything, that we shouldn't let a simple party come between us, and that I was being cruel by holding a grudge. My father stood there red-faced, telling me that I was biting the hand that fed me, even though I couldn't remember a single time in the last 10 years that they had supported me in anything. They tried to guilt-trip me about my childhood, about how much they had sacrificed, and about how I was breaking their hearts. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I didn't yell. I didn't get emotional. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply told them that they hadn't sacrificed for me. They had invested in a version of me that suited their needs, and now that the product didn't match the expectation, they were lashing out. I told them that for as long as I could remember, I had been the one sacrifice, the one making sure they were comfortable while I lived on scraps, and that I was finally done with that role. I told them to leave my property, and that if they ever returned, I would not hesitate to call the authorities. It was the most liberating sentence I had ever spoken in my entire life. Watching them leave, sputtering and fuming, I felt like the air in my lungs was finally clear. The fallout was massive. They told the rest of the extended family that I had changed, that I had become too big for my boots, and that I was the one in the wrong for cutting off blood over a simple misunderstanding. But they were wrong. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice they made, and I simply accepted it. The rumors spread like wildfire, and for a few weeks, I received nasty messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins who didn't know the full story and only heard the version where I was the villain. It hurt for a moment seeing people I thought I knew turn their backs on me, but it also helped me filter out the people who were never truly my friends to begin with. It was like a controlled burn of my social circle. The dead wood was cleared away, leaving only the people who were actually worth my time and effort. I stopped trying to explain myself. I stopped responding to the messages. I focused entirely on my restaurant, on my craft, and on the joy of creating something that was entirely mine. Today my restaurant is thriving, and I haven't spoken a word to any of them in 6 months. It hasn't been easy, and there are days when the silence at family gatherings is hard, but I have found a family in my staff and my loyal regulars. I've learned that sometimes the hardest thing to do is walk away from the people you thought were your foundation, but often that foundation is what's holding you back from ever standing tall. I have created a space that is defined by love, hard work, and mutual respect, and not by the toxicity that I was raised in. My staff has become my chosen family. We celebrate birthdays, we support each other through hard times, and we genuinely care about each other's success. It's a kind of bond one never knew possible because I was too busy trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. I've realized that the greatest form of revenge isn't lashing out or seeking destruction. It is living your life so well that the people who doubted you become entirely irrelevant. I no longer look for their validation when I launch a new menu item, and I no longer check the guest list to see if they're coming. I am free. I am the architect of my own life, and for the first time I am building something that is meant to last, not something that is meant to please others. It's funny how, in trying to save my family, I almost lost myself, and in losing my family I finally found who I really am. Every day when I walk through the doors of my restaurant and see the faces of people enjoying the food I made, I am reminded that I made the right decision. I am reminded that my worth is not a variable to be calculated by someone else's opinion of me, but a constant, rooted in my own integrity and my own achievements. If you ever find yourself in a position where the people who are supposed to be in your corner aren't even showing up for the game, stop trying to play for them. Your value is not determined by their attendance, and your success is not dependent on their approval. Stop wasting your energy trying to convince them of your worth. Use that energy to build your own empire, your own joy, and your own life. You are not a prop in their play. You are the lead in your own. Take the leap, build the dream, and if they don't show up, let them stay in the dark while you shine. I hope this story reminds you that you deserve to be surrounded by people who celebrate your wins as much as you do. If you were on my side in this, I would love it if you could like this video. It really helps the channel grow. If you want to hear more stories about setting boundaries and standing up for yourself, make sure to subscribe. And please drop a comment below and let me know how you would have handled that situation. I'm reading every single one of them. I'll see you all in the next story.